Hello and welcome. This is Home Life for Extraordinary Impact, and my name is Matt Barrios. I'm a husband, dad, researcher, writer, and coach, and I'm doing global explorations on home, interviewing experts and everyday folks all around the world about what helps them set up their homes to be places of regular growth, meaningful connection with other people, and also to set up their life at home to be a place that they can really jump out into making a good impact in the world all around them. That's what I'm exploring through this show and through my research. And today I get to interview Dr. Gwenyth Jackaway. She is based in New York City, in Manhattan. And thank you, Dr. Jackaway, for coming on.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to meet you in this context. And hello to all your listeners.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited to talk with somebody who is an academic, a consultant, an expert in wellness, and is really kind of digging deep into that. And I want to just tap into your expertise on all of those things as it relates to home. So first question, how do you set up your home to bring your best to your work and your life?
Thank you. It's a great question. I've been pondering it in anticipation of our conversation. So I'm very fortunate to have lived in the same place for 30 years, which is not that common in New York City. So I've had a chance to really make this my home in a way that I know many people, they move into an apartment for a couple of years and, then people move on. And I understand you can make home wherever you are, even if you're just traveling. But when you're in the same place for a long time, you have an opportunity to try things out and figure out what works and what doesn't. I'm always, it's always a work in progress. But one of the things that I do when I'm traveling, and it's certainly very much a part of my home, is that I like to have a place that I think of as my altar. I'm a meditator, and I practice mindfulness, and I'm interested in Buddhism and a few other spiritual traditions. And so I have an area in my bedroom where I have my meditation cushion and various things that remind me of my practice, and some candles and some photographs and little sayings that remind me of where I want my attention to be. And that's an important place, and I've spent a great deal of time sitting there, doing yoga in front of it, reading, meditating, journaling. And I visit it sometimes more than others, but it's my own little sacred space, and I really recommend that to people, even if you don't have the space for a whole little corner or a whole room. I've seen people who are fortunate enough to have a whole room for that. Even just, a little corner of a bookshelf, if you put a few things, a stone, a photograph, whatever it is that reminds you of whatever is precious to you. I think it makes a big difference. So
yeah, that sounds powerful. Like that meditative practice of, just to be spiritually present and making sure that you have a space that represents that for you in your own home space. And perhaps it can travel with you too when you're traveling, but just something that sets a tone for,
that's right.
I want to be spiritually awake right here.
That's right, because, be here now, and wherever you go, there you are. And it's, the space that we're trying to remember is always with us, but we can get really distracted. So that's why whenever I travel, I wear various jewelry that helps me to remember, but I'll bring along a little stone or a little, something that means something to me. It doesn't really matter what it is. It could be a toothbrush. Nobody would know what that, if it's something you have to keep private, but just whatever it is, like a little talisman of your deepest values. So, and
Wow.
I'm fortunate enough to live in a loft. Excuse me. So in Manhattan, that means there's another level, but not a normal staircase. It's like, you can't even fully stand up in it, but it's pretty big, kind of like a crawl space, but you can sit up in it. So I have another little altar area up there, but that's more of like a retreat space. And in that area, and to some degree in my altar area, but very much upstairs in the loft, no work is allowed. And ideally no digital media, with the exception of like a meditation music, or if I'm listening to a meditation podcast or something, but no work, no emails, no, social media. That's a space to go within.
That sounds so helpful to have dedicated spaces where work is not allowed, where, the distractions of social media and the digital life aren't permitted there. That just sounds like a very pro move for home, especially in a digitally saturated world that we live in. How did that become important to you?
So it's really the intersection of two of my main passions, which seems to be what's happening a lot at this stage in my personal life and in my professional life. So I spent about 30 years on the faculty of Fordham University in the Department of Communication and Media Studies. So
Wow.
And I will always be an academic in my soul, even though I'm not at this moment teaching college. But I'm an educator, and the thing that I've always been most fascinated by is media communication, and specifically mediated communication. So here we are. I don't even know where you are physically. I'm in New York City, but we're certainly not in the same space, and yet we're having this interaction. And we just kind of take it for granted, like, plug into things, and suddenly we're having this interaction, which is then going to be available to, now I bring you the sounds of New York live.
Yeah. Well, the sounds of San Francisco might be coming by here
okay.
too.
Well,
so, yeah.
transcontinental. So, and then, people around where your audience, whoever you reach, they'll hear it. And that's all absolutely remarkable. And yet with new communication technologies always come challenges. So I'm a media historian by training, and my primary interest is the impact of new media on society. So I spend a lot of years looking back, like how did the world change when we got telephones? Not cell phones, the actual telephones.
Right.
What was life like before that? How did life change when the radio arrived? You and I can remember the introduction of some earlier media, and each time there's this interesting double effect. People get all excited, like, oh, this is the new cool thing, and everybody gets one. And then after a while, we start to say, well, it's different than it was before now, because communication is at the heart of what people do. We don't, that's one of our superpowers. We don't have wings, and we don't have claws, and we can't really survive very well in the environment without a whole lot of support. And yet we have these big forebrains, and we have language, and we have opposable thumbs. And so, communication is at the heart of the human experience. And for so much of human history, there were just a few options, like spoken word, body language, obviously, and music, and all the nonverbal forms of communication. And then, then writing comes along. Wow,
Yeah.
And there's a long time as human beings get used to writing and how that changes life, and then the printing press. And then there's another few hundred years as people get used to that. And then over the last 200 years, it's been like faster and faster and faster. And we keep getting new machines. And, eventually we incorporate the thing, whatever it is. Like, people don't talk as much now about, video games as they did back in the 90s. You're kind of used to video games, now we're on to social media.
Yeah.
So I'm still answering your original question. So I spent years thinking about the impact of new media, and in a parallel part of my life, I've always been very interested in mindfulness and meditation, and I've had my own journey of spiritual exploration and personal growth. And I didn't think of those two things as related. Like, one was my professional life, and one was just my own inner journey. And it wasn't until around 2010 when I was riding on the New York subway, and I started noticing everybody's got one of these things in their hands, and everybody is looking down. and people are walking on, and then, I started noticing, once I noticed it, I could not notice it, and I saw people on the
Right.
street walking around like this, in in Manhattan, on the sidewalks, crossing Manhattan streets, looking down,
Yeah.
and it just hit me like, when I saw rows of people sitting in the subway I thought, this is like everybody sitting with Bibles. But it's not a Bible. It's the latest, tablet that we're all focused on. And of course, people are consuming different content. But there is a sense of, I don't know, almost the ritual of it. Like you sit down in a public space, you take out your screen. You're in line at the bank, you take out your screen. And I started to realize what we're all focusing our attention down, first of all, and that changes the public space, because then people aren't really looking at each other. And we're all going kind of into another place. So our bodies are there, but you're off in cyberspace, but some part of you is monitoring the environment so you get off at the right stop. But everybody's and then people have headsets on also.
Yeah.
I thought, everyone's retreating their attention to this alternate space. So at that point, I started to think about the intersection between mindfulness and mediated communication.
I love that. If I could just jump in real quick with this story to illustrate your point, which I remember noticing this shift as well. And I noticed, well, I'll tell two things. First, just real quick, I remember noticing how much muscle memory is in, I can navigate to different apps on my phone without holding my phone. It's just
wow.
I just know, that's where I would push to get to the browser. That's where I'd go to hit
get to that
Instagram
app.
or something. Right. It's just it is pure muscle memory for my thumb, and and so there's one thing and I was just blown away, wow, this is just in my
automatic
body, my yes, it's part of the norm, the standard, right? The second thing, I was on BART, kind of our
Subway
kindergarten version of Subway,
right.
Right, in the Bay Area. It's so not as good as the New York Subway. But I was on BART. I used to live in Oakland, work in San Francisco, so heading over under the bay, and there was this. It was packed, morning commute. Everybody was on their phones and had headphones in. I didn't have headphones in at the moment, and I wasn't on my phone at the moment. And the only other person was this man who, appeared to be unhoused and was kind of asking for money and everything.
Right.
And he started singing, "Mr. Rogers, please won't you be my neighbor?"
Oh.
And I swear, I started tearing up. I started kind of getting misty-eyed because nobody heard it except for me. And it was one of the most beautiful things. I transport back to that moment, and it was so powerful to watch this guy do this.
Wow.
But nobody heard it. Nobody saw it because everybody had headphones on and was on their phone.
It's very poignant and very sad.
Yeah, it is. And so that, to illustrate your point, public space has been drastically shifted by the fact that everybody transports to cyberspace.
Right. And the children are watching us.
Yeah.
So, now this has become a norm among adults. And, it's not like we ever had a cultural conversation about public etiquette. And I know you're thinking about interior spaces, but, what's a norm in public space is a whole other fascinating conversation. And, there's always been codes of etiquette, and they change over time as culture changes. But this is a dramatic one, because it's not like a change in how you can dress in public or what you can eat or smoke in public. It's about the shutting down of our awareness and connectedness to each other, which that's dramatic. And, there's a lot of hand-wringing about, kids today on their social media. Well, where are they learning this behavior? We as adults give children the technology, and then we're all on our phones, and it's put your phone down. We need to lead by example.
That's a very good point. So, yeah, I feel like very aware of the fact. Yeah, I have a almost 2-year-old, and
Oh,
she will grab things and she will, treat them like a phone. She doesn't have a phone, but she already is like grabbing a random like my library card the other day, and she was like saying hello, and it's just like so immediate already. So yeah, the children are definitely watching and being formed in a
yeah,
way.
yeah.
And yeah, gosh, like what do you do with that, Dr. Jackaway? Like what do you do with something like that? Like what's the help for
Well,
this new reality?
right. So first, I'll tell you a little bit about what I've been doing lately
Yeah.
to place this all in a little bit more context. So as I mentioned, I spent many years teaching college students about this and a variety of other issues. And, I spent a long time grading midterms and teaching 20-year-olds. And I reached one of those midlife moments, maybe you can relate. And I said, as much as I adore classroom teaching, I was interested in making a bigger difference in the lives of people outside of that age group and also outside of that context, because obviously not everybody goes to college, and many people went to college a long time ago and nobody was talking about these kind of issues. And parents today are facing challenges. You're facing challenges, and you will be facing challenges that your parents did not face with you because these technologies did not exist. Teenagers are having an entirely different adolescent experience. I mean, some things are universal about being a teenager, but they're growing up in an entirely different communication environment. And it's hard for parents to understand and appreciate their attachment to and their vulnerability to these technologies. And nobody's really, teachers are facing a lot of challenges. So I left higher ed to try to make a difference outside of that environment. And during COVID, I did some additional training in something called, so I have a PhD in communications, but there's an emerging field that's known as digital wellness or digital well-being. Seems to have a couple of different names. It's still emerging, but the idea is, we all have a sense of what wellness might mean in terms of our physical health. And there's increasing understanding about the importance of thinking about mental health, right? And so that's a whole industry, the wellness industry. So in wellness, it's about, making good choices, having a lifestyle that supports the different aspects of health, eating the right kind of things, sleeping, getting enough sleep, enough hydration, moving, etc. Talking about your feelings, these are all kinds of parts of wellness. So now we were all wired together, not something we ever voted on or really had a national or global discussion. It just sort of evolved, and suddenly we're all connected globally, which is amazing and terrifying, and there's a lot of challenges that come with it. So digital wellness is a movement, an emerging field that's about providing education to people about some of why these technologies are so compelling and hard to put down, and also how we can learn to make healthier choices in our relationship with technology. So I am now a digital wellness educator. So I'm finally getting around to the answer to your original question, and I do workshops in schools about digital wellness. And I'm also doing some consulting work. So I'm an educational consultant with a wonderful company named Carrots and Cake, and that's the name of an app that they produce that is designed to help parents in the job of placing some limits on children's use of electronic screen devices, specifically kids between age 3 and 10. So your daughter is almost eligible.
Yeah, almost eligible. I love it. The mission that you're on around digital wellness, I see how it is like very much an emerging conversation, and one that like I think it's similar in my mind to something like the work from home
Yes.
conversation. I see parallels where, like, all of a sudden, people are working from home.
Yep.
And now, for a lot of folks, it is becoming the norm for the rest of their lives. And nobody has figured out what health looks like in that
Right.
quite yet.
Well-
right?
Sorry, go ahead.
So I just see parallels where, like, okay, so social media, internet, everything, right? This interconnected world. All of a sudden we have it, and now we're catching up for this I don't know, this drop in the pond, and now how do we respond? And what does health look like in this? So what have you found is producing health in digital spaces?
That was a great lead-in. Thank you. So before I answer that question, I want to address this issue of remote work and the boundary between the outside world and the home life.
Yeah.
So once upon a time, long before the internet, there were already some communication devices that entered the home, specifically radio and television. And back then, there was some concern, like, now the outside world is available, and maybe your kids will see stuff from the outside world, where the outside world didn't just come into the living room at the touch of a button, right? What were kids going to see? What were the parents going to see? What, ideas from far away, or pictures of things you might not be comfortable seeing, and suddenly, bang, there it is, right? So this boundary, when you talk about what is home, and for those of us who are fortunate enough to have a physical home and want it, there's a sense that it's a boundary, the walls and the door and the roof and all that, that's a shelter, and the outside world is out there. And then, you have whatever you create in the home. And obviously, all of these technologies have off switches. And, back in the day, people worried about TV addiction. And, that's an interesting conversation, but whether or not TV can be addictive. It's not nearly as addictive as we perceive social media and the internet to be, for reasons that have to do with brain science, and for reasons that also have to do with how the technology is designed. So I can get into that. But so the work from home officially brought work into the home. Obviously, people have long been bringing work home, right? Like, that's not new. But the fact that you can have a work meeting from home, with your business shirt and your pajama bottoms, and this is somehow the new normal. Like, yeah, it's convenient, and there's lots of positives about it. However, it also means you never leave work.
Interesting.
And you're never really home away from work. So that boundary has gotten either erased or at least made very blurry. And, as an academic and as a former professor, academics bring work home a lot. Most college professors, they're on campus maybe 2 or 3 days a week. And then you're sitting at home grading papers, doing research, writing, whatever.
Yes.
We've long been the ones who work from home. And so I used to have a rule that I was not allowed to bring any work-related books or papers, this is before the internet, into my bedroom. That there would be a space where I could go away from work just by walking into the other room, but at least that was not at work. So that is one thing that I highly recommend to people. And it's linked to this idea of have a space where digital media is allowed. But, and I understand that for some people, their whole lives is just their computers. Their whole work lives is just in their computer, but we're still generating a lot of paperwork. So, for people who really do work from home in a formal kind of way, if there is any paperwork, and, have your desk, if you have enough space for this, have your desk and work area separate from where you sleep. You shouldn't, if you're fortunate enough to have enough room, I think that's key. And then, in terms of our digital lives and digital wellness in the remote working age, And I would add, in the increasingly international and global nature of work,
Yes.
where there's not a clear-cut, when does a workday begin and end, I think it's really key, if people have enough autonomy or agency in their job life, to have hours after which you're not available or before which you're not available. So if you get an email from your boss at midnight, are you expected to respond? What are the expectations in the corporation? Digital wellness is not just about the physical space. It's also about the use of time and what we expect of one another and how quickly we expect people are supposed to respond. Like, just because I can email you right now while we're talking and you'll receive it right now while we're talking, then is that reasonable for me to say, well, hey, didn't you get my email? And you could say, well, I'm on a Zoom. And I can say, you're on a Zoom with me, so respond. And that, for some people, they're at work and their colleague is slacking them and they're being called. And, that's digital unwellness.
The amount of input and the number of ways that a person can be, a person's attention can be drawn, right? Like it is, I don't know, I'm getting like a picture of like a medieval torture device, like you getting your limbs pulled apart, right?
That's
it'll destroy somebody.
Right, and our attention is increasingly the most valuable commodity in the marketplace, because there's always more products you can make and sell, until we entirely deplete the planet. And it seems to be an endless amount of space on the internet, right, for more and more websites. Wouldn't it be funny if we one day got a message, sorry, the internet is full? But it seems not to happen. So we have this endless amount of content, more all the time. The statistics about how many YouTube videos are uploaded every second, it's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But there's still only 24 hours to the day. And we still need to sleep and eat and have a life off of our screens. So part of what digital wellness means now is making some intentional, selective choices about where you're placing your attention. And that means like putting up those kind of blinders, like when horses are riding in Central Park, which they shouldn't be doing, but and they put these, I don't know what they're called, blinders around their face so that they don't get distracted and spooked because of the cars. And I'm increasingly convinced that the ability to stay focused, which is part of mindfulness, and be present in the midst of all of this digital distraction is like the superpower of the 21st century. Because we're constantly being interrupted. Now, I am guessing that you have your notifications off right now, as do I, because otherwise we both would have been tinged or binged or, buzzed during this conversation. But because there's a kind of etiquette of podcasts that has to do with sound quality, we know the rules. But if I, in the middle of this, just started to say, oh, wait, hold on a second, I got to take this call, that would be like violating a sort of digital etiquette, right? But we haven't developed that as a society. And
there's a lot of unspokens now at this point, right? And everybody's unspoken is actually a little different.
That's right.
So there's plenty of people who are in relationship, either in a romantic relationship or friendships or a relationship with their children or their parents, where picking up the phone in the middle of a conversation is just kind of okay and normal, and you're expected to just kind of wait until they get back to you and you're sitting there and they've just gone, that's called fubbing. I don't know if you've heard that expression.
I haven't heard that expression.
It's a new word.
Wow.
It's snubbing someone with your phone.
Oh.
P-H-U-B-B, fubbing. So it's kind of like saying, I'm just going to leave the room now for a while, and my body's still here, but my attention has gone somewhere else. So digital wellness is a lot about attention and intentional attention and how to cultivate that. So you asked me for some suggestions, and I'll give you a few more, and I want to frame it also into the context of families and parents.
Yeah, great.
Especially since you are a new one. You have just the one child so far?
Just the one.
Just the
That's
one,
right,
a little one, okay.
So, as I mentioned, since children are watching us, you've got a little more time, in terms of getting your act as a role model together. But by the time she's 3 or 4, she's going to certainly be aware of your digital life. So, I say to parents, be a good digital role model. Of course, that's easier to say than to do for all of us, and especially in a time where the boundary between work and home and life is so blurry. It may not be that easy to always keep your phone down when you're parenting. So that's already a challenge that families have to make a decision about, but certainly the younger the child, this is actually even more important because they're still developing language and they're just developing their understanding of linguistic turn taking. So you speak, then the other person speaks, and there's a back and forth, and they need to see your eyes. So, if you're looking down, they don't feel that reciprocity. So it's key when they're small, even if you can't always be mindful about your phone use around your children, be sure that you at least identify a few times in the day where you're really present with them and let them feel your energy and be there. Put your phone away, and, it's like you're at a meeting at work. You're not available during that time. You're having your parenting time. So that's key. I think it's all kinds of research shows the power of device-free meals as much as possible. And if it's not possible for every meal, at least have it be one meal of the day. Nobody at the table has their phones or pads or whatever, and not the TV and not a newspaper. Be present with each other and practice talking. I know it's old-fashioned, and because kids need to learn. All right, what does it mean to be around a table where there's no way to leave the circumstance? You just need to interact, and a lot of teens are uncomfortable with face-to-face interaction because there's a lot of ways in which texting is easier. You don't necessarily see someone's sad, disappointed face, or, you can kind of hide behind the anonymity of the screen.
Yeah.
Then it's also important to help them learn about the value of balance in their technology use. So the Carrots and Cake, this wonderful parental control app that I mentioned earlier, it's designed based on what we have learned over the last few decades about neuroscience and the brain. So part of why, and I won't get too scientific here, but part of why it's hard for all of us to put the phones down, particularly social media, or if you're a news junkie like me, the news websites, is based on how our brains respond. So there's a neurotransmitter that our brains produce called dopamine, and it's produced when we're searching for something that's going to be a reward. So it helped our ancestors find food and shelter and mates, that feeling of like you're hunting for the right thing for dinner, or you're looking for that next apartment or your next mate, right? And that's that feeling of like, I'm hunting, and it feels good. It's kind of like energized and alive. And then you get the thing, and it's like, yay, I got the thing I was looking for, and that's like, hooray, it's a big burst of dopamine, and then some other transmitters like serotonin and oxytocin. So it's a little chemical soup that's going on in our brain, and that feels really good. And social media appeals to our very deep survival need to be connected to others, right? So if somebody likes your picture, you're like, okay, I'm part of the tribe and I'm safe, right? And that's really primal stuff. Children's brains are not done developing, and it's the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that manages self-discipline, self-control, and reason and logic, and it doesn't fully develop until people are in their mid-20s, which is why you can't rent a car when you're 20. The insurance companies figured this out a long time ago because young people are more prone to risk-taking. They're highly drawn to bonding with their peers, and their brains literally have not finished developing. So if you say, put that phone down, you're asking them to do something that's much harder for them, and it's hard for us. It's hard for
Right.
adults to put their
Right.
phones down. And this is, of course, even more the case with smaller children. So kids between the ages of 3 and 10, they're not on social media as much, but they're doing game platforms that are accessible through the phone, or they're on YouTube, or Roblox, or various other kind of games, which are giving them rewards and likes and another life, or swords, or you rescue the princess and you win the battle, and that all feels great, right? And then it's mom saying, "Put that down and come to dinner," and like there's just a power struggle that's waiting to happen, right? So
it's automatically setting up a parent to be cast in the light of the villain in the relationship, right?
Ooh, nice and put.
Like you basically end up being like the one who's in the way of the dopamine hit, right? Like
absolutely. Plus, many parents don't understand that you can't just leave the game in the middle. Like most games, you'll lose all your points, or you'll lose your health credits, or maybe you're playing with other kids who are all logged in, and if you leave in the middle, like the team will lose. You can't just pull somebody out. It doesn't work. So what Carrots and Cake, so the name of it, which I really appreciate, is based on, kind of old parenting trope. Finish your vegetables before you have dessert, right? So carrots and cake. So there's a lot of wonderful learning apps, educational apps, from things like Khan Academy or Sesame Street or Duolingo, these things that they're visually engaging, and Elmo is singing, and that's fun, but there's some learning. There's learning going on, and it's noted good quality with some educational value. And it also doesn't give them constant prizes and power-ups, and so there's not that same level of dopamine hit. And that's important, because if you're not as engaged, it's a little easier to stop it. So the way Carrots and Cake works is you download it onto your pad or iPad or phone, and you set it up so that if the child picks it up and tries to use it, the first thing they have to do is do some of the carrots, which you can decide ahead of time which games, which learning technologies they have to do. Maybe it's 10 minutes of Duolingo and 10 minutes of Khan Academy, and then you can decide how many minutes of cake they'll get. And here's where their agency, like they have a favorite, website that they like to go to, all right, and they get however many minutes, 10 minutes on that. And then, during the cake time, they get little warnings. 5 more minutes, 2 more minutes. So you get that, like, okay, kind of interrupts the flow, and then it shuts down. And then what's nice is then the parent doesn't have to be the technology police.
Yes.
And especially for little children, you can say, well, that's it, I guess, it doesn't work anymore. Or you can say, as they get older, you can explain, like, these are the rules, and this technology, it's wonderful in lots of ways, and like anything to excess, it's not healthy. They can't have 18 pieces of cake, You wouldn't send your child into Times Square unsupervised, which is what the internet is. And so Carrots and Cake also, you can set it up to block any web browsing at all, except for the designated apps that you've given permission for. Because as they get older, of course, kids get curious about the world, and they can pretty easily access all kinds of material that parents may not want them to see yet. So you can set it up to block that. So if you've got a Zoom meeting, you can hand your pad to your child, and you know that there's some boundaries, and they're learning about healthy technology use. And they also learn that things end. The endless scroll, the bottomless bowl. TV shows end, movies end, books end. So their time online can have boundaries too, and that's not punitive. It's preparing them, and as they get older, and you have to help them learn to balance their schoolwork with their digital lives, because just wait, in about 10 years, you're going to be saying, no time online until you finish your homework. And that's a rough one. But if they've already experienced those kind of limits, then they'll start to learn all right, and that teaches delayed gratification, which is part of what Carrots and Cake also teaches, which is a very important skill. You can't always get what you want when you want it, but if you keep working hard, maybe you'll get some later, and those are important skills for adulthood.
That is so good. And gosh, I've been hearing you talk about this app. Like, I love so many things about it, including the fact that, like, I as a parent won't have to be the bad guy who is saying, sorry, baby, you can't do that anymore, or whatever, right? Like, it can be built into the technology itself.
That's
that there's
right.
boundaries. That sounds so extremely helpful. I'll have to check it out.
That's great. So I wanted to let you know, because I know that we're probably starting to run out of time.
Yeah.
For your listeners, there's a special code
Awesome.
for a 60-day free trial. So
Perfect.
the code is Home Life. One word, Home Life. Doesn't matter, uppercase, lowercase, I checked. So Home Life, and it's carrotsandcake.com. That's where
Perfect.
you can find
Well,
it.
that's awesome. Well, yeah, let's just take this as a little opportunity to wrap this up then.
Okay.
And so that's like a great place to, for anybody who's listening to go check out Carrots and Cake and use that code Home Life. And I hope it really helps a lot of people.
Great.
Now, what other things have you been working on these days, and how can people be connected to you
So
if they want to stay connected?
Thank you. So, especially for people in the New York area, I offer workshops in schools. Right now I'm working with another wonderful company called Robin that goes into schools to bring social emotional learning, and I'm creating a digital wellness program for them, so I'll be bringing it into schools, but I'm also available to do talks for parents, for teachers, and I also I was a college professor, so I do some tutoring. If anybody has a high school student who needs some help with their college application essays, I do that kind of thing as well. So you can find me at GwenythJackawayPhD.com. I assume the spelling will be in the show notes, right? But
Yes, it will be, yeah.
Right, great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jackaway, for such an enlightening conversation that, covered history of media and the way that we evolved to like this new digital world and what that has to do with home and parenting and so on. So thank you so much for being such an interesting person to talk to.
My
I really,
goodness.
really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for doing such interesting work. I would love to learn some more about it as well. I've long been interested in cultural anthropology, and I can feel how this is what you're doing is linked to all of that. So.
Yeah, thank you. A little bit of ethnographic research on all this stuff. That's what I'm going for.
Yep,
So,
like to tell.
well, thank you, Dr. Jackaway, once again, and thank you everybody who has been listening. Hope you found this episode helpful for you as you're exploring what does being in this evolving digital landscape in your home look like. What does good boundaries look like in parenting and so on. So, thank you so much for listening, and until next time. Thanks for listening to Home Life for Extraordinary Impact. I hope you enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed putting it together for you. Please take a moment to rate it, like it, and subscribe wherever you have listened or watched. Home Life for Extraordinary Impact is a project of Home Life Design Lab. Go to homelifedesignlab.com to sign up for the newsletter or to follow the Instagram. Thanks.